Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Gause Culpepper, the president of the Dallas Women Lawyers Association, and I'd like to welcome you to a Texas tribute for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We are honoring the life, work, and legacy of our beloved Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This event is co-sponsored by a number of local and statewide Texas women's bar organizations, and I'm so happy to have them here. We all collaborated to put this event together. As I mentioned, I'm with the Dallas Women Lawyers Association. We have the Texas Women Lawyers, the State Bar of Texas Women in the Law section, and the Texas Trial Lawyers Association Women's Caucus. The DWLA's mission is to elevate the standing of women in the legal profession, and that's certainly what Justice Ginsburg did for each of us. So I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth Larrick with the Texas Trial Lawyers Association Women's Caucus to say a few words.
You knew that had to happen once today, y'all. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Stephanie. I am honored to be a part of this group and honored to be invited to help put together this amazing tribute. We have some amazing women here today to help us honor Justice Ginsburg, and so I'm delighted to be a part of this and to be happy to help sponsor. So thank you again, Stephanie and Deborah and Teresa, for your hard work in putting this together. And I'll turn it over now to Teresa.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. My name's Teresa Schiller, and I'm chair of the State Bar of Texas Women in the Law section. Today, this is a celebration of women in the law. We're advocates, leaders, and officers of the court. And I'm so proud of women in the law in Texas because, like Justice Ginsburg, you treat challenges as opportunities, and you become stronger, smarter, more capable, and more successful along the way. One woman who exemplifies this is our moderator, Deborah Cordova. Deborah is president of Texas Women Lawyers and a past chair of the State Bar of Texas Women in the Law section. She's also a partner at Walsh, McGurk, Cordova Nixon in McAllen. Deborah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Teresa, for the introduction, and a special thank you for all of your hard work and dedication in helping us facilitate this program and bringing it into fruition. It is an honor and a privilege to participate in the Texas tribute to Justice Ginsburg, a legal, cultural, and feminist icon, an advocate for women and changing our nation in doing so, a pioneer and an inspiration to women of all ages. This nation, without a doubt, has lost a historic figure. This afternoon, we have a phenomenal panel of women that will share their thoughts and expertise as we embark into the life and the journey of the powerful Justice Ginsburg. Our first panelist is Sylvia Barunda Firth. Sylvia is president-elect of the State Bar of Texas, the first Hispanic woman to serve in this role. Sylvia runs her own law practice in El Paso. Welcome, Sylvia. Also on our panel is Justice Deborah Learman. Justice Deborah Learman is a Texas Supreme Court justice. She has presided over several courts during her 30-plus years as a judge. Welcome, Justice Learman. Our third panelist is Justice Eva Guzman. Justice Guzman also is a Texas Supreme Court justice. She is the first Hispanic woman elected to statewide office in Texas and the most senior justice on the court. Welcome, Justice Guzman. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us here today. I'd like to jump right into it and dive into this. And I want to start with the early life of Justice Ginsburg. And so we'll start with Ms. Firth. Justice Ginsburg grew up in a Jewish family in Brooklyn. Her older sister passed when she was a baby, and her mother died the day before Justice Ginsburg's high school graduation. She went on to earn a bachelor's degree at Cornell University, the highest ranking female in her class. In the 1950s, it was not common for women to attend college, and she did so in the wake of a significant family loss. Ms. Firth, what does this tell you and tell us about Justice Ginsburg?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to share my reflections on the incomparable Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I'm honored to be included on a panel with Justice Guzman and Justice Lehrman. And it's not false modesty when I say to you, I don't feel worthy to be included with two such accomplished women, talented lawyers and jurists. And I really, before I start answering questions, I need y'all to know that I'm not now, nor have I ever been, a litigator. And in my mind, the appellate practice is an arena reserved for lawyers who are far more scholarly than I am. So when in my responses, even later on, we talk a little bit about her work in the law, you'll see the difference between my answers and the other panelists. But I guess that's probably why I'm here, to give a different viewpoint. I'm a woman who came of age in the late 1970s and the early 80s, and my generation is the first generation of women who had the benefit of the hard work done by Justice Ginsburg and the other women who led the movement. So my comments reflect that. But back to Deborah's question. So I've read a lot of books and articles about Justice Ginsburg, and I've even watched videos. Nowadays you can have access to all of those things. And I heard her accounts in her own voice about her young life, her childhood, and her life as a young adult. And it's very clear that Justice Ginsburg's mother was a very powerful influence in her life. And she helped to mold her character and gave her the confidence and fortitude to succeed. Her mother, by all accounts, was a very intelligent woman herself, and she had quite a bit of business acumen. But when she was a young woman, as was customary at the time, she went to work at an early age to support herself and to help her brother, Saul Amster, to attend Cornell University. And by the time Ruth was born, she set a goal to get her only surviving daughter the same kind of education that she had helped Saul achieve. She was a demanding parent, and she expected much from Ruth. She was also an avid reader and loved music and the arts, and she shared those passions with Ruth, which we see through all of her life. She had very explicit goals for Ruth, and it was two in particular: education and independence. But she also wanted Celia wanted Ruth to have the benefit of an elite private education, and she started saving money. By the time Ruth reached high school, it was clear that she was a high achiever and would have opportunity to attend college. She'd been accepted to many colleges by the time she graduated, but her 4 years in high school were marred by her mother's battle with cancer. Her mother was diagnosed with cervical cancer during her freshman year. So throughout her high school career, she watched her mother suffered through this illness, but it was a really strong woman. But before she died, her mother made sure that she got her brother Saul to write a letter of recommendation to Cornell for Ruth. And she lived long enough to know that Ruth had been accepted at Cornell and other universities. And by the time Ruth was ready to go to college, she had saved $8,000, which was a very tidy sum in those days. Unfortunately, because when her mother died, Ruth's father took it very, very badly. And Ruth gave most of that money to her father, who was struggling financially. She kept some, and then she relied on scholarships and part-time jobs to make it through Cornell. And I think what we see is Ruth very much wanted to fulfill her mother's dreams for her. And one of the evidence of that is when she gave her speech in the Rose Garden after her nomination, she thanked her mother. And this is what she said. These are really powerful words. She said, "I have a last thank you. It's my mother, Celia Amster Bader, the bravest, strongest person I have known, who was taken from me much too soon. I pray that I may be all she would have been had she lived in an age when women could aspire and achieve, and daughters are cherished as much as sons." Wow, I think that says it all. So with that kind of background, it's no wonder that she could make it through Cornell, and then later through 2 years of Harvard with a baby and a husband sick with cancer.
Thank you so much, Ms. Firth. And that's the perfect segue to our next question. I'd like to just go through this next question with Justice Learman. Justice Ginsburg married shortly after graduation. They moved to Oklahoma for a few years for her husband's military service. And she worked at the Social Security Administration, where she was demoted for becoming pregnant with her first child. A year later, she entered Harvard Law School, and Justice Ginsburg transferred to Columbia Law School when her husband got a job in New York. She was the first woman to be on 2 major law reviews, and she also tied for first place in her class at graduation. What do these experiences and accomplishments tell you about Justice Ginsburg? And also, how do you, Justice Learman, make work-life balance work? If you could share a personal story as well.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I also want to echo what Sylvia said in terms of thank you so much for inviting us to join in this tribute today. It is truly an honor to be here. What this tells me about Justice Ginsburg is somewhat obvious, something that we all know, and that is that she was brilliant, hardworking, dedicated, tenacious, mindful, and forward-thinking. Now, how many women do you know that would describe? Many. I had the privilege of meeting Justice Ginsburg several times through my work through the American Bar Association and the Uniform Law Commission, and had the privilege of having lunch with her several times. And she always spoke of the importance of mentoring, the importance of role modeling, and the need for women to support each other and to never let anyone get in your way. I've seen firsthand women from all segments of society abide by this advice to work through so much to achieve their potential, and all while balancing their professional lives with their personal lives. You know what they said about Ginger Rogers, you know, she could do anything that he could except she had heels on and did it backwards. And we all know that's true. I graduated, I think about the same time that Sylvia did. I graduated from UT Law in the early 80s. 1/3 of my class was female. I certainly didn't have the issues that Justice Ginsburg had. I didn't have trouble getting a good job, but I was affected by my desire to have children. Greg and I, my husband, met in law school. We married shortly after that. And after 8 years of marriage, we decided to start working on our family. By then, I was already an associate trial judge. I always joke, I was a judge before I was a mother. I got pregnant with our second son several months after I gave birth to our first son. They were only 15 months apart. And after I had been off on maternity leave with our second son for less than 4 weeks, and I had only taken 6 weeks off with the first son, I was told by the district judge of the court that I served that I needed to get back to work immediately and that I better not have any more children. Now, I don't think that would happen today. I hope not. I don't know whether Greg and I would have had any more children had that not been said to me, but that certainly sealed the deal. But I was determined. I just wasn't going to let that attitude deter me. I just put on my big girl shoes, worked like crazy. Greg and I raised our 2 sons, both of whom are now practicing lawyers, as we continued to just work constantly. I wrote several legal treatises for Lexis, and I updated them yearly. And most of that writing happened while I was sitting on my bed across from our son's rooms, tending to them while I was working on the treatises. But you know, it was also worth it. Today, just moments ago, Justice Guzman and I had the privilege of watching our governor swear in Rebecca Huddle to our court. So now for the first time in Texas history, we have 4 women serving on our state's highest civil court. 4 women who've all pursued their dreams, our dreams, while maintaining a healthy personal life. And indeed, this is a wonderful day for all of us. The 4 of us had our picture taken just now, and Justice Huddle said, "Do you think the guys are going to mind?" And we said, "Oh, well, probably not." It is indeed a great day.
Thank you so much, Justice Learman. And yes, that is fantastic. Congratulations. So we've heard a little bit about Justice Ginsburg's early life. We've heard about after graduation, then law school. I want to move on to after law school with Justice Guzman. After law school, Justice Ginsburg, she had trouble getting a job. A Columbia Law School professor actually pulled strings to get her a federal clerkship. And he had to guarantee that he would provide a replacement clerk if she did not succeed. She did so well that the judge renewed her clerkship for a second year. And as Justice Learman said, a resilient and a tenacious woman. What else does this tell us about Justice Ginsburg?
Thank you very much, Deborah, for inviting me, Texas Women Lawyers, to join you today. It's truly an honor to be on the panel with Justice Learman and President Veranda Firth, being the first Latina to serve as State Bar President. When that happened, it was just such a powerful moment for so many Latina lawyers in the state. You truly groundbreaking accomplishments, and just so wonderful to be here with you. Justice Learman mentioned the quote that we're all so familiar with. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, she did everything he did backwards and in heels. And just think about that for a moment. That applies to all of us, and it still does. For whatever reason, we are still expected to do it all and to do it with a smile on our face, and to never show the stress of those moments. But Justice Ginsburg's story resonates with a lot of women in the law, and especially women of color. The unseen or unacknowledged barriers make the accomplishments all the more compelling. There, I am certain, is so much more that she experienced that none of us will ever know or see. She, as you know, was the second female to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, and she became a role model for thousands of women, not just lawyers. If you look at the tributes after her death, women from all walks of life were inspired by her life. She fulfilled all of her roles at a time in our history when engaging in any one of them was groundbreaking. So think about that for a moment. Even more so with the level of success she achieved. At the time she did all of this, women just weren't doing these things. When she graduated from Cornell University in 1954 with a degree in government, fewer than 6% of American women were college graduates. Put her accomplishments in that perspective. When she attended Harvard Law School in 1956, she was one of only 9 women in a class of 552 men. Think about that. Now, while attending Harvard, she cared for her toddler daughter and her cancer-stricken husband. That was the second time cancer struck someone she loved dearly. And she helped him to stay current in his own law school classes so he could graduate on time. Talk about thinking about others first and putting someone beside yourself first. After 2 years at Harvard, she transferred to Columbia and graduated first in her class at a time when a mere 2% of law degrees were earned by women as compared to men. But what's so powerful is that despite all of these accomplishments, those of you that were fortunate enough to meet her know that there was a warmness and a humility about her. She just made you feel like she was speaking with you, noticing you, worried about you. what can I get to know about you? And that's very, very powerful. She responded to the disparate treatment of women by becoming a leader. And that's one way that we are still experiencing in our own careers disparate treatment, not to the extent she did, of course, but to some extent. But she became a leader in advocating for women's rights. She became the voice that was the catalyst for the change. She didn't pull the ladder up behind her. She opened the doors. And that's what's so powerful about Texas women lawyers, opening the doors. You are opening the doors for so many women across the state. So to close, she did all this while striking at the heart of stereotypes that have long been impediments to professional women. That women lack the inherent skills men possess for the job. That women aren't as committed to work because we're too worried about our children or, the home. That women can't do as good of a job if they're also playing any number of roles. We're caretakers, we're wives, we're mothers. And so when she finally argued her gender discrimination cases before the Supreme Court, in the mid-1970s, no women were serving on the court, and yet her service as a lawyer created the change for not only women around the country, but also paved the way for the first woman on that court. So thank you all for allowing me to share a little bit about her. I just feel like we can't, what can we say? There is not enough we can say about her. And I'll talk a little bit about my own experience as a first in a subsequent question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Guzman. Speaking of opening doors, if you can briefly explain to us and let us know, how have you accomplished the ability to open some doors? You have experienced some certain first, and you became the first Hispanic woman elected to statewide office in Texas, and you're the first woman and the first Latina to hold this honor. If you would briefly explain how you have accomplished this.
Well, it's been with the support of so many wonderful, Justice Learman mentioned this, the mentoring aspect of what we do. It's been with a lot of hard work, a lot of determination. I won't go into my own story, but you all know I grew up in the barrio and we didn't know lawyers. And, my parents had third grade educations and it was just a different time for us. But I had great mentors along the way. Even today, less than 2% of lawyers are Latinas. So we have a long way to go, but I was able to reach what I consider the pinnacle of a judicial career. At least for me, it always was service on the Supreme Court of Texas, because I remained focused on what the goal was. I set the goal many, many years ago. I worked on whatever deficiencies I perceived, and I played up my strengths, and we all have them, strengths and things that we know we need to work on. And then, like I said, I was just fortunate to have a lot of mentors in my life. And I, through my service, have tried very hard to open the door for others and to empower women and to empower women of color. And that is, if I can do that, I feel like I lived a life well lived. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Guzman. Let's turn it over to Ms. Firth. Certainly, you have to work extremely hard to be successful, and working hard she did, Justice Ginsburg. She made a name for herself in legal academia at a time when there were very few women. She worked with a Columbia professor to co-author a Swedish book on gender equality. And she also taught civil procedure at Rutgers Law School. So when she started working there, she was informed that she would earn less than her male counterparts because she had a husband who made a good salary. She received tenure and co-founded the journal called the Women's Rights Law Reporter. This was the first U.S. law journal to focus exclusively on women's rights. Justice Ginsburg went on to teach at Columbia Law School, where she also received tenure. She is known to have been shy, and she was physically a small person. Yet in academia, at the front of the classroom and through her writing, she excelled under circumstances more challenging than faced by many male colleagues. Ms. Firth, can you explain and give us your thoughts of what this tells us about Justice Ginsburg?
Sure, thank you. Well, I think when you watch Justice Ginsburg and the way that she progressed through her professional career, and also in the way that she approached her litigation, she's very strategic, and she knew how to pick her battles. I think that's one of the things that's left with us. So it's interesting to note that when she went off to college, she has said she never even had considered a career in the law. And both Justice Guzman and Lehrman have mentioned the value of mentors in her life, and so in all of our lives. And she spoke about a professor at Cornell who was a constitutional law professor who encouraged her to study law. He recognized her talents and he encouraged her to pursue that. But her family was dubious about it. They didn't think she could earn a living because it was, after all, 1959, and there just were not that many women lawyers. But she was very interested. And then, at this point in time, we begin to see the importance of her life partner, Marty. So she and Marty were already romantically involved by this time at Cornell and trying to decide what their next steps were going to be. And it's interesting that I read that they had decided that whatever career they undertook, they were going to do it together. And Marty had started college intending to be a doctor, and Ruth did not want to be a doctor. And then they decided maybe they'd go to Harvard Business School, but Harvard Business School was not accepting women at the time. So she convinced Marty to let's go to law school. And it's interesting that despite all of her amazing achievements at both Harvard and Columbia, her family's concern about her employability was well-founded. As we know, she had a hard time finding a job. And she's quoted as saying that to be a woman, a Jew, and a mother to boot was just a bit much in 1959. So as Deborah mentioned, she went off to Sweden and did her scholarly work. And when she came back, she got her job at Rutgers, and she was glad to have it because at that time, imagine this, there were only 18 female tenured law professors in the entire country. So she set about her goal of becoming a tenured professor, knowing about the discrepancy, but she and the only other female faculty member at Rutgers at the time, they just simply accepted it as the price of admission. And she had a year-to-year contract, so she was being strategic again and didn't want to make waves. And then the second year she was there, she became pregnant again. And as was mentioned earlier, she had had that negative experience in Oklahoma. So again, she was not going to make waves, but she resolved to do her job exceptionally well, which she did. And hopefully that would prove out and earn her the respect of her colleagues. And she did. She gained tenure there and also at Columbia. So I think that's a lesson that we get from Justice Ginsburg about being strategic, picking battles. And she was also confident enough to know that her skills and her work ethic would get her through. And I think that's a valuable lesson for all of us. She also talks about not acting in anger and being thoughtful in the approach to things. So I think this is an example of that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Firth. Speaking of strategy, let's move on to when Justice Ginsburg became just the second female U.S. Supreme Court justice when she took oath of office on August 10th, 1993. Throughout her 27-year tenure, she left a powerful mark. So this question's for Justice Lehrman. Justice Ginsburg is known for having worn distinctive colors, and some reference it as truly dazzling neckwear with her judicial robes. Commentators have interpreted her choices as subtle expressions of political opinion. What are your thoughts about the meaning behind her distinctive colors?
Well, thank you for that question. And her colors were indeed distinctive and beautiful, weren't they? I see it more as an expression of her unique personality and taste rather than as a political statement. As I said, I had the privilege of knowing her, and she was very warm. She was very family focused. She was very, very dedicated to her professional life, but she was also just as dedicated to her personal life, to her role as a partner and mother to her children. And I think she wanted to let the feminine part of herself shine, to show that the two things can go hand in hand. You know, when I first began to practice law in the early 80s, and I'm sure that Sylvia, President Firth, will remember this, what was really the deal at the time was the dress for success. And so women frequently wore gray pin suits with little string bow ties around their collar and kind of tried to fit a certain mold. I never really particularly cared for that look, so I continued to wear my less tailored suits, always with a lot of attention to professionalism, but didn't really go for that pinstripe look. Before too long, that style kind of went out of vogue as women realized that they could express themselves and their own sense of style as long as they did so with professionalism. And I think that that was part of what Justice Ginsburg was doing. You know, having said that, I have to tell a little story. One time when I was a district judge, I was walking in to court, and back then we didn't have all of the privacy restraints that we have now to protect everyone. So there I am, you know, just walking down the hall and going into the back door of the courtroom, but the public was out there where they could see us. And it was a Friday, and I'm just hopping in in a very, very good mood. And a gentleman who happened to be a litigant in my court at the time, but I didn't know it, who was standing there and saw me walking in and said, "Look, there's the court reporter." To which I said, "No, I'm the judge," and walked on in. So we all have experienced those types of things, I know. Hopefully we're becoming more and more mindful of the importance that we not judge people based upon however they look. I do think things are changing. Like I said earlier, Greg and I have two sons who are both lawyers now. And I remember one time when they were little, maybe 3 and 4 years of age, and the four of us, Gregory and Jonathan and Greg and I, were sitting on the couch watching a television show. Now, remember, I was a judge before I was a mom. And so a lot of my friends who the kids knew growing up were also judges. And I think it was Jonathan that said, "Look, Mom, on TV, they let that man be a judge." So I think things are changing. We just need to continue to live the lessons that the wonderful Justice Ginsburg has taught us and stick together, and things will get better.
Thank you so much, Justice Lehrman. Justice Ginsburg was certainly known for her distinctive collars, and so I'm going to move on to Ms. Firth. She was also very well known and is very well known for her notable opinions. Justice Ginsburg is known for an opinion that she wrote in Ledbetter versus Goodyear in 2007. In her dissent, she called on Congress to pass legislation that would override a court decision limiting back pay for victims of employment discrimination. 2 years later, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009 became law. Ms. Firth, how significant is this development for women in the U.S.?
Well, I think it's very interesting to note in earlier discussion, we talked about the discrepancy in pay that she experienced at Rutgers. And what people forget is that there was already federal law that was against that. I mean, the Equal Pay Act had been passed in 1963, and look how it was just being ignored. So Justice Ginsburg came to this question having experienced the discrepancy in pay herself. And in that opinion, she talks about the court not being grounded in reality of what actually happens when somebody is experiencing discrimination at the workplace. And it's very significant to note that this opinion, she frequently talked about it as being one of her favorite cases. She's very proud of the work that she did. And it was so important to her that she decided to deliver an oral summary of the dissent from the bench. And that doesn't happen often, and certainly didn't happen often for her. In the term that was the 2006-2007 term, which was the second term under Chief Justice Roberts, she actually delivered 2 oral dissents from the bench, and the second one was Ledbetter. And this was unprecedented for her too. We've talked about how quiet and unassuming she was. So at that time, the New York Times reported that this was the term when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg found her voice and used it. And thereafter, she became a frequent bench dissenter. You watch her in history, you can see that. And at the end of the dissenting opinion, the written dissenting opinion, she actually called out Congress, and she said, "This is not the first time the court has ordered a cramped interpretation of Title VII, incompatible with the statute's broad remedial purpose." And in 1991, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act that effectively overrules several of this court's similarly restrictive decisions, including one, Lawrence, upon which the court relies today. So today the ball again lies in Congress's court. As in 1991, the legislature has cause to note and correct this court's parsimonious reading of Title VII. She calls them out and says, "You see what's happening here, and the court is not interpreting what your intent is properly. Go and fix it." So that was the first piece of legislation signed by President Obama, and she was very proud. She was there, and in fact, if you remember that. So I think that the act, it once again recognizes the reality of wage discrimination and how it happens, and how people, I watched something where she was speaking about it, and she said when people are experiencing this, the first instance doesn't necessarily lead to a federal case. And you try to work your way through this, and you try to work around it, and ultimately may have to avail yourself of the court, and time has passed. And so this is significant because the Ledbetter Act allows for the retroactive correction of discrimination that has been suffered, and the intent of the act is to close wage discrepancy between men and women, and we're seeing that movement in that direction. We still have a way to go, but it has been very important.
Thank you so much, Ms. Firth. Justice Lehrman, is there a notable opinion of Justice Ginsburg that you would like to comment on and describe the impact on women in the law and the greater community?
Well, certainly. Justice Ginsburg wrote so many beautiful, wonderful, brilliant opinions that did so much and had such an impact on all of us. And we all are very, very familiar with that. One thing I'd like to talk about today that I think was really of significant impact was a case that she argued before the Supreme Court before she became a justice. She argued her first oral argument before SCOTUS in 1973. And in that case, Sharon Frontiero was an Air Force officer whose husband had been denied housing and medical benefits that female spouses of male Air Force officers received automatically. So when Justice Ginsburg was in court, she argued, and I quote, this wasn't in the argument, this was speaking later about her argument. She said, I quote, "I knew I was speaking to men who did not think that there was any such thing as gender-based discrimination, and my job was to let them know that it really existed." And so she very deliberately chose her cases in such a way so that she could make an impact through people in authority who would not perhaps be able to relate if she had done that while representing a woman. She was truly a genius in this sense. And this was the first of 6 cases that she argued before the Supreme Court. And this victory certainly set the stage for the future. I had the privilege of working with another legend, Louise Raggio from Texas, who was one of my primary mentors when I was a very young lawyer. She was similar to Justice Ginsburg. She was a pioneer of women's rights. In fact, one of the times that I had dinner with Justice Ginsburg was at an SMU library that was celebrating Louise Raggio's accomplishments. A lot of people may not know that it was largely because of Miss Raggio that in the 1970s, married women were finally given the right to own property. Until then, it wasn't possible for women, including my own mother, to buy a car without their husband's help. So Louise worked hard on this legislation, and she did work day and night, frequently appealing to people who were men in authority in the same ways that Justice Ginsburg did, and so that she could try to get them to relate to whatever it was that she was trying to get across. So during one of these negotiations, and there were many, she was here at the Capitol, and they were in a part of the Capitol where there were no public women's restrooms. Now, that's hard for us to envision now, but that's how things were not that terribly long ago. And she thought, what can I do? She had talked to the Chief Justice. She had talked to the governor. She had talked to people in authority to try to get them to understand that there needed to be a public women's restroom in this area of the Capitol, to no avail. So finally, at her wit's end one day, she followed the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Texas, yes, into the men's restroom. And as she was in the restroom, of course, she didn't do anything improper, and she made sure that, you know, nothing was going on that would have been inappropriate. But she did ask him, as she was just at the door there, how he would feel if his daughter would have had to go through this in order to simply do something that was obviously so necessary as having to go to the restroom. Within a month, there was a public women's restroom in that part of the Capitol. So I believe that Justice Ginsburg did so many things in the same way that Louise Raggio and so many people who have come before us have done, to open the door so that as you had introduced whenever with Justice Guzman, who's just someone I admire so much and has done such wonderful work for the state of Texas and for our court. She and I are the 2 highest vote getters in the history of Texas elections. And then we have President Ruth, who's the first Latina woman president of the State Bar of Texas. So many firsts, so many things that we've been able to do because of people like this, largely Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's paved the way for all of this to happen for all of us. And I know we're all so grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Justice Lehrman. So we heard a little bit about notable opinions. We heard about Justice Ginsburg advocacy during her legal career. I want to now turn to Justice Guzman and want to discuss a special relationship. Despite their ideological differences, Justice Ginsburg considered Justice Scalia her closest colleague on the court. Can you describe the relationship and the role that civility played?
Thank you. I think their relationship is well known. After she passed, there was a lot of activity on social media highlighting the nature of that very special friendship A few years ago, Justice Scalia and Ginsburg were honored for exemplifying civility in public life. They were chosen for that award because the respect that they had for each other, even though they were so different, transcended their ideological divides. And I think that's what democracy demands. In explaining professionalism, cordiality, and friendship required of service on the High Court, Justice Scalia once said, and y'all know he was real pointed, but he said, if you can't disagree ardently with your colleagues about some issues of law and yet personally still be friends, get another job for Pete's sake. So, I mean, I think in his classic fashion, he really was highlighting the fact that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think their friendship really exemplified that. The Supreme Court of the United States represents a microcosm of the legal profession. It's a place where ideological opposites sit side by side. They're sharing spirited but civil debate. It's a place where a legal odd couple like Justice Ginsburg and the late Justice Antonin Scalia led by example. They showed us all we can disagree passionately, but still remain friends. And as judges and as lawyers, we can't lose sight of the purpose of our advocacy. It's to advance the rule of law. Generally speaking, we're not there to advance ourselves. We're there to advance the rule of law. So how we act, how we comport ourselves in the courtroom affects how the public perceives our profession, and what they think about the courts, and what they think about the system of justice, and how they think it serves them. So I think in this time of escalating civil unrest, political discord, it almost seems like civility has no place in the modern 140-word Twitter character world that we live in. But even in these difficult times, I think there's an opportunity, and particularly an organization like Texas Women Lawyers, there's a real opportunity to change the conversation. Even though our lives are by and large adversarial, let's work together to cultivate civility, to cultivate respect, to cultivate those values that we thought about when we went to law school. I'll close with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. When the conduct of men is designed to be influenced, persuasion, kind, unassuming persuasion, should ever be adopted. It's an old maxim, but it's true. That a drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall. So I encourage all of us to think about the relationship between Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg, to think about how eloquently Abraham Lincoln said it, and then the old maxim, hey, a little honey gets us a lot further. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Justice Guzman. Before we go to Q&A with the attendees, I'd like to end on one additional question for Ms. Firth, because I think it's extremely important. Justice Ginsburg was a champion of gender equality, and today we strive and continue to strive towards diversity, inclusion, and equality. I'd like for you to explain to the lawyers how we have a special obligation to work toward a more just, inclusive, and diverse society, and what can the legal community and legal places of employment do to help increase that?
Thank you. So I think the answer is we are held to a higher standard. We have all sworn an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of these great United States. So we're the last people who should be engaging in unconstitutional behaviors or tolerating them in the workplace. And we should be examples for the rest of society to not only respect, but encourage diversity and inclusivity. Justice Ginsburg herself addressed it, and she gave a speech about women's progress at the bar and on the bench. And she addressed the importance of women's participation in the judicial system. She was quoting Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Jean Coyne, and she said, "At the end of the day, a wise old man and a wise old woman will reach the same decision. But it's also true that women, like persons of different racial groups and ethnic origins, contribute what the late Fifth Circuit Judge Alvin Rubin described as a distinctive medley of views influenced by differences in biology, cultural impact, and life experiences. Our system of justice is surely richer for the diversity of background and experiences of its judges. She's talking about judges there. And it was poorer when all of its participants were cut from the same mold. So you think about those words. The system is better when we have divergent viewpoints. But so then the question becomes, how do we go about improving diversity? And we all know we've made progress, but we're still a long way to go. The facts and figures are still abysmal. So as I've undertaken my role as the president-elect of the State Bar, I've continued reading a lot about different means and methods being tried by those in the legal profession all over the country. So I've spent half of my career in government, and I have to tell you, I think the government sector is ahead on issues of diversity and inclusion. But the legal profession as a whole is generally perceived as being very far behind from the rest of the professional world. Of course, if I had the answer how to do it, I'd be a very wealthy woman, and I plan to keep working on it and chipping away at it a little bit of time. But like I said, I've read a lot about it, and I think there's a movement afoot right now to talk about seeing diversity as a strategic factor that contributes to profitability. You need to make a business case for diversity and how it is that it improves the profitability of companies. The legal profession needs to measure ability to perform by metrics, and make sure that you have measurable outcomes. One point that's being made now is that in hiring, the legal profession tends to measure the individual's ability to perform academically, and that's not necessarily proof someone will be a good practicing attorney. So start looking for different ways to evaluate the abilities of others. There's a move afoot to say, in order to attract and retain minority lawyers, firms should engage more in lateral hiring so that there will be more senior lawyers in the firm that are diverse and can serve as mentors for the minority hires, because minority lawyers often feel isolated. There's numerous surveys that are done to find out why it is there's so much attrition with minority and women lawyers leaving the profession. And it's a frequent statement they make that they get tired of having to prove themselves over and over because the bar is set higher for them. So we need to find ways to battle that. I know several women on the line are probably with some of the larger firms in the state who are participating in the program run by Diversity Lab, which is working to improve diversity and giving measurable goals. And one of those tools they advocate is the Mansfield Rule, which requires for every hiring that you have to interview 30% of the candidates need to come from a diversity background. Doesn't mean you have to hire them, but you need to give them a look. So I think all of those things are important. We can all work on them together. I've spoken about videos that I watched, and I watched a video that was taken in 2013 when Justice Ginsburg was honored by the Harvard Law School on the anniversary of her 20th anniversary of taking the bench of the Supreme Court. And at the very end of it, she talks about it. She says she really does believe that the law has taken all the measures necessary to correct things for women. And now it's our turn to take up the fight, take up the project, and change human nature and bring about change. So I think that's a great place to stop. I mean, it's now our turn. Justice Ginsburg did her work, and it's our turn to do ours.
Thank you so much, President-elect Sylvia Firth. Appreciate that insight. So now we'll go to our Q&A, and we do have a couple of questions that have come in. And this goes to the panel, and maybe we can start with Justice Guzman and then move on to Justice Learman. How can we as women encourage and promote the celebration of women who continue to break glass ceilings in the political arena without appearing political?
That's a great question, and I think at bottom we need to have courage to do so. I love that on my Facebook page, many of the women that run on the party that I don't, I celebrate their achievements and they celebrate mine back. And I got a text from someone and they said, do they know that's a Republican award? I said, absolutely they know, but they have the courage because we're happy for each other, because we celebrate each other's accomplishments. And it just takes courage, and we have to have just these thick skins and just shake it off. You're going to get the criticism, but we need to elevate our support for each other and our celebration of accomplishments over the partisan divide. And when the conversation needs to be about policy, then we have them and we disagree. There's nothing to disagree about when one of my friends gets a big award. I'm happy for them. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Justice Guzman. Justice Learman?
I agree with Justice Guzman. When I think about women supporting women and what we need to do to help each other, I don't think of it as political. I think of it as just something that we need to do for a lot of the reasons that President first talked about in terms of why diversity is important. And diversity I'm talking about now in terms of gender issues, because it gives us a different perspective, a needed perspective. We can relate to each other. The more that we talk about things, support each other, discuss the issues that all of us are dealing with, then the more apt we are going to be able to find solutions. Interestingly, I think this whole COVID situation has kind of opened an area of discussion that we really hadn't talked about much before. And that is the ability to do a lot of work from home or remotely without needing to go into a certain place to do that work. And I think in line with what President First was saying, there's a lot of studies now that are out there that are showing that employees are more productive and that it is making a difference in terms of dollars and cents for companies and law firms when a little bit of relaxation has come into the picture in terms of exactly how that work can be done. That's something that women for years, let's face it, have been talking about that. We recognize the importance of that, but it's been kind of hard to get that through. And COVID has made us all look at it. And I think there will be lasting change as a result of this because the numbers are there, the productivity's there, people are seeing it. And as long as we can be more productive, taking on not just that, there are other things that we can do that are new and forward thinking, then we will be able to make a difference because, the proof is in the pudding and it's there.
Thank you so much, Justice Learman. I think we have time for one more question before we close. And this goes to Justice Learman and Justice Guzman. While Justice Ginsburg was known for her work on gender issues in the law, but was subject to criticism on several fronts, do Justice Learman and Justice Guzman have a message they hope outlives their time on the bench?
Oh, goodness. Of course. I would think that what I would hope that would, outlive my time on the bench is that whatever I did and whatever work I was pursuing, that I did that with a view towards the betterment of others, to improve society for the benefit of all of us. And certainly that includes my own gender, women, but that also includes everyone. As many of you know, the entire court is extremely dedicated to ensuring that justice is accessible to everyone, not just those who do not have the means to hire an attorney. And as Martin Luther King said so eloquently and so frequently, if justice is denied to one person, it's denied to all of us. And I certainly have lived my life professionally trying to live that out, trying to do everything I can to further that greater goal, to teach my children the importance of that. And my husband, of course, has been a wonderful partner in that endeavor. And that's what I would hope that would be my legacy, that this was not at all about me. It was about others.
Thank you, Justice Learman. Justice Guzman?
I'm going to talk about it in a real personal way. She believed she could, and so she did. And my journey has been shaped by determination, by persistence, by ignoring any negative voices and seeking out the men, the women that believed in me and that helped empower me. And I hope that our audience, that as you think about where you are in your career, that you believe in yourself, that you pursue your dreams, your goals. We're never too old to have a different dream or a different goal. And that you persist, that you stay the course, that you keep your eye on the prize. That is what has shaped my journey. And I leave that with you. Believe that you can and you will.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to President-elect Firth, Justice Learman, Justice Guzman. It was an honor and a pleasure to be able to participate and moderate this program. I'd like to end with a quote, and then I'll pass it over to Stephanie. This is one of Justice Ginsburg's quote as well. "I would like to be remembered as someone who used whatever talent she had to do her work to the very best of her ability." And indeed she did. Stephanie?
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you to all of our distinguished panelists. As it's been mentioned several times, each of you are trailblazers, and I think Justice Ginsburg's legacy and what she stood for really lives on with you. And we thank you so much for joining us. I want to also quickly thank the state and local women's organizations who helped make this possible. And I think as we close, it would be great as each of us think about what is the one thing they can do to carry on the work that Justice Ginsburg started. And let's all do our part to empower and support women. As Ms. Firth said, it's our turn to do the work. So thank you everyone for joining us to celebrate Justice Ginsburg. Hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.